I'll just revise what we have discussed in the first two paragraphs. In the first paragraph, Vandana Shiva talks about homelessness, and this homelessness can be real and imaginary. First kind of homelessness is culturally homeless, that there is no rootedness. Example is transnational cooperation executive. Second is physically homeless. Example is tribals. So homelessness is described as a cultural characteristic of the late 20th century, and this has caused two classes. This has caused classes of homelessness. Now the difference is on the screen. You can see it. First set is culturally homeless. There is no rootedness. They are mobile on a world scale. They don't have one particular country as their home country, and for them, whole world is a property. For the second set, who are physically homeless, they have lost mobility. They they are driven out of their homes. They are forced to live in refugee camps, resettlement colonies, and reserves, and they are displaced due to colonialism, development, and the marketplace. Now, we have seen the first two paragraphs. Now, in the third paragraph, Vandana Shiva discusses the idea of development as uprooting. Now you can see the development here has caused uprooting. It is driving out people. It is making people lose their roots. Now that aspect of development is highlighted, or on that aspect of development, Vandana Shiva throws light on it. Now we see only the glamorous or the good things about development, but there is other side to development which we are blind to. Now development, we have become so obsessed with development that it has become a new religion. Development has become a new religion, and dams, mines, energy plants, military bases, bureaucracies, technocracies, and these are the symbols of this new religion. Now, is this development benefiting all? Is it helping all of us? Now, that is the question that is raised by Vandana Shiva in the next paragraph. Development as uprooting. Dams, mines, energy plants, military bases, these are the temples of the new religion called development. A religion that provides rationale for modernizing the state, its bureaucracies and technocracies. What is sacrificed at the altar of this religion is nature's life and people's life. The sacraments of development are made of the ruins and desecration of other sacreds, especially sacred soils. They are based on dismantling of society and community, on uprooting of people and cultures. Since soil is the sacred mother, the womb of life in nature and society, its inviolability has been the organizing principle for societies which development has declared backward and primitive. But these people are contemporaries. They differ from us not in belonging to a bygone age, but in having a different concept of what is sacred, what must be preserved. The sacred is the bond that connects the part of the whole. The sanctity of the soil must be sustained. Limits must be set on human action. From the point of view of the managers of development, the high priests of the new religion, sacred bonds with soil are impediments and hindrances to be shifted and sacrificed. Because people who hold soil as sacred will not voluntarily allow themselves to be uprooted. Development requires a police state and terrorist tactics to wrench them away from their homes and homelands and consign them as ecological and cultural refugees into wasteland of industrial society. Bullets as well as bulldozers are often necessary to execute the development project. Now, as I've said, now the idea of development is discussed in this paragraph. Now, in media, uh, in academia, in newspapers, and other forms of news dissemination, what we get is the picture of development is a very good one, which is very glamorous, which shows development in a good light. But the impact of development, especially on the people who don't have voice, who live on the margins of society, what happens to them? Is development Are the fruits of development available to everyone? Now that is the question that is discussed here. Now, because of development, many people are exploited, their lives are destroyed. Now this paragraph throws light on that. Now, as I've said, development has become a new religion, and dams, mines, energy plants, military bases. Now, these all are symbols of new religion. They are the temples. In fact, during the time of Nehru, when we got independence, dams, institutes, and everything were called as the temples of the modern state by Nehru. So, this is how development is defined. Its infrastructure, the physical thing, the money, everything that is development. That is a concept of development that we are trying to practice in life. A religion development is a religion that provides rationale for modernizing the state, its bureaucracies and technocracies. So all this is happening because of this particular idea of development. Now, Vandana Shiva is finding fault with this concept of development. Development as we are practicing in the real life. So, Vandana Shiva does not agree with this kind of development. Now, what is sacrificed at the altar of this religion is nature's life and people's life. Now, uh, we all know in religious practices we come across the practice of sacrificing something, right? Now what is sacrificed here? The nature's life, the people's life is sacrificed for the sake of development. We are losing connection with nature. We are not living in harmony with nature. We are destroying nature, which in turn it means that we are in turn destroying ourselves without knowing the consequences. Also, it is destroying the people's life. Not everybody is benefited by this idea of development. This idea of development is not inclusive. Not everybody is included. Now that is highlighted by Vandana Shiva. So because of this kind of this concept of development, nature's life and people's life are destroyed. They are sacrificed for the sake of development. The sacraments of development are made of ruins and desecration of other sacreds, especially sacred soils. Now, because of this idea of development, the sacraments of development, sacraments means important religious ceremony. Because of these things, because the idea of sacred can be, different people can have different idea of sacred. What is sacred to one set of people might not be sacred to other people. Now, because this development is benefiting only one set of people and they are carrying out because it is helping them. But what about others who are not benefiting, whose lives are being destroyed? What about them? What about their feelings? What about their culture? What about their customs? Are we really thinking about them? Because we are not thinking about them, because of we are carrying one concept of development which is not inclusive, the other people's what is near and dear to them, what is their custom, what their style of life is destroyed, especially the one who are connected to soil, who are culturally rooted to one particular place, their lives are destroyed. Now we have the concept of Mandi Namaga or Mandige Runi Agiru. Now these are the concepts we have, right? So this kind of idea doesn't suit to the transnational executive, because for them they are not rooted in one particular place. They are physically homeless. They are physically not homeless because there is no culturally they are not culturally rooted to one particular place. But there are other people who are culturally rooted and their lives are destroyed. They are based they are based on dismantling of society and community, on the uprooting of people and cultures. Now, because of this kind of development, we are dismantling society and community, the tribal society, the people who live on margin, their customs, their tradition, their lives are destroyed. They are uprooted from their cultures. They are they are separated from the people, from their very own people because of this. Since soil is sacred mother, the womb of life in nature and society, its inviolability has been the organizing principle for societies which development has declared backward and primitive. For some kind of, there are certain people who, for whom soil is sacred. It is sacred. It is so sacred that they call it as their mother. Soil is the very womb of nature and society. It is through soil we grow crops in the soil, right? So our food, everything comes, we live on the soil, we are connected to the soil. For example, look at farmers. One picture that is highlighted these days, this is a picture which is highlighted in literature, in the recent literature, as well as in certain movies and documentaries. One picture is of of a tractor carrying full of people, tractor carrying people from the villages moving towards in these tractors, people who are uprooted come to the cities in search of jobs. Now, when they come to the cities, they are physically homeless. They are uprooted because of the reasons of development. Now, this is a very, very image which we should haunt us. So this has become a common sight in metropolitan cities. Now, this is caused due to development. Now, is this the kind of development we have to pursue? Now, this raises questions about the kind of development we are pursuing. Now, this development, the development which we are pursuing has declared the people who are rooted to soil as backward and primitive. The people who are rooted to the soil, people who live in this kind of culture, are labeled as backward and primitive. And people who are benefited by the development, they consider themselves as the one who are civilized. Whereas the other people who are at loss because of this kind of development are labeled as backward and primitive. But both people are living in the same, but these people are our contemporaries. Now both kinds of people are living at the same time, but they differ from us not in belonging to a bygone age, but in having a different concept of what is sacred and what must be preserved. Now both these kinds of people are staying at the same time, but the difference is they are not living in a different kind of age, but but their belief system is different. So because they are rooted to people, they are labeled as backward and primitive. For them, soil is very sacred. They want to preserve the nature. Now, on this particular idea, there is difference. The sacred bond, the sacred is the bond that connects the part of the whole. The sanctity of the soil must be sustained. Limits must be set on human action. So certain set of people consider soil as sacred. They are connected to it, they are rooted to it. It completes their life. So uh, that sentiment has to be respected. You cannot uproot people from these places. The sacred, the sanctity of soil must be sustained. Limits must be set on human action. The activities that are carried in the name of development have to be questioned. There has to be limit on these actions, and the soil has to be sustained, because we are destroying soil, we are exploiting the soil, we are driving out the people who live on this soil. we are using pesticides, we are uh, instead of growing just two crops, we are harvesting three or four crops from the soil. The fertility of the soil is lost. We are seeing the increasing cases of desertification. Now all this is happening because of development. So the human action must be, um, there must be limit to human action. You cannot allow all these activities, because they at last it will destroy us. We are destroying ourselves without actually knowing it. From the point of view of the managers of development, the high priests of new religion, sacred bonds with the soil are impediments and hindrances to be shifted and sacrificed. See, there are different point of views. The high priests of the new religion, the managers of development. Who are these managers of development? The one who are benefited by this kind of development. They consider these are elite people. They are on the higher rungs of the society. Don't live on the edge or the margins of the society. They are people who have benefited from the development, and they are spreading this kind of idea. According to them, any bond with the soil, the sacred bond that the people have with the soil, they consider it as impediment, as hindrance, and this has they have to people have to lose their connection with soil, and that kind of sentiment should not be carried, because people who hold soil as sacred will voluntarily allow themselves to be will not voluntarily allow themselves to be uprooted. Development requires a police state and terrorist tactics to wrench them away from their homes and homelands, and consign them as ecological and cultural refugees into wasteland of industrial society. Now, why the high priests of this new religion, that is development, they don't want people to have connections or sacred bond with soil, because the moment the people have sacred bonds with soil, you cannot uproot them easily, because they are culturally, emotionally attached to the soil. They will not easily give up their land. So what will they do? They will protest. So if they start protesting, it will not be easy to take them away. Because of that, the people who are in power, the people who are benefited by development, they have to use police state, they have to use police against them. They have to be these people who are protesting, or who are against this kind of development, they will protest. So in order to drive them out, the people who are in power, the people who are benefited from development, they have to use strong tactics. They will use police state. People will be lathi charged. There will be goli bars. So terrorist tactics will be used to drive them out. And because of this, people will become refugees. Now, refugee crisis is another problem we are facing worldwide now. There are different kinds of refugees. One, the one we are quite familiar is political refugees, because they will be displaced from a certain country. They will take refuge in other country. That is political refugees. But because of the development, because of the side effects of globalization, we are increasingly seeing ecological and cultural refugees. Who are these ecological refugees? The people who are uprooted because of economic destruction. For example, there are many islands which are under threat of being submerged in the ocean. For example, Maldives. Maldives is an island in the Indian Ocean, which is a small island, and because of the rising sea level, that Maldives is in danger of being submerged. Now, if the Maldives becomes submerged under the sea, where will the people of Maldives go? They will be ecological refugees. And for example, because of the increasing sea level, Bangladesh is in danger of being submerged in the Bay of Bengal. Now, people who will be affected from this will become ecological refugees. Also, similarly, cultural refugees. People from who tribals, for example, if you take away their culture by uprooting them from their soil, they become cultural refugees. So now, because they don't easily give up, people in power have to use police. They have to use terrorist tactics to drive them, to drive these people from their home and their homelands, and they will become refugees where in the wasteland of industrial society. Now look how the industrial society looks. People don't have that connect. So in this, for example, I gave the example of people who come in tractors as refugees to the metropolitan cities. So they will become refugees in the metropolitan cities, in this wasteland of industrial society. Bullets as well as bulldozers are often necessary to execute the development project. So because people will be very much attached to their homelands, their very existence and their livelihood, their emotional, the emotion, they are emotionally attached. So driving them out will be very difficult. So because of that, you have to use police state, you have to use bullets, you have to use bulldozers to execute the development project. So you can clearly see there is one particular set of people who are benefited, and there is another set of people who are at loss. Now Vandana Shiva is talking from their point of view. She is giving voice to the voiceless. In India, the magnitude of sacrifice is only now becoming evident. Victims of progress have, of course, experienced their own uprooting and have resisted it. But both the victims and the state perceived each sacrifice as a small one for the larger national interest. Over 40 years of planned development, the planned destruction of nature and society no longer appears negligible. The larger national interest turns out to be embodied in an elite minority without roots. 15 million people have been uprooted from their homelands in India during the past 4 developmental decades. They and their links with soil have been sacrificed to accommodate mines, dams, factories, and wildlife parks. Now, because people have to see, if the development projects have to go on, a certain sacrifice has to be made. We cannot the same regular kind of life cannot go on. So some kind of sacrifice has to take place. But who is going to make these sacrifices, and to what extent is the question. In India, the magnitude of this sacrifice is now becoming evident. Now, the magnitude, the extent of the exploitation, the extent of people suffering is becoming now evident. Now it can be clearly seen. Victims of progress, of course, experienced their own uprooting, have resisted it. The people who have been uprooted, for example, tribals, for example, farmers, they are protesting, and we come across such incidents, such news all the time in media. But both the victim and state perceived each sacrifice as a small one for the larger national interest. So both the one who have benefited and the one who is not benefited, the state is benefited and the people, elite people, are benefited from this kind of development. But there are victims of this kind of development. Both also agree that some kind of sacrifice has to be made in the larger national interest. But there is imbalance in the sacrifice. The people who live in the margin have paid a heavy price. They have made a lot of sacrifices, and the people in power, the state, the government has benefited from it. Over 40 years of planned development, the planned destruction of nature and society no longer appears negligible, and the larger national interest turns out to be embodied in an elite minority without roots. Now, if you see the history of last 40 years, in the name of planned development, we have systematically carried out the destruction of nature and society. And the extent of destruction no longer appears negligible. The destruction is huge, and the havoc it has caused in the lives of people is huge. It cannot be neglected. And the propaganda or the news or the a perception that is made that the in the interest of larger interest we have to sacrifice. But what is this larger national interest? Is it serving everybody, or is it serving only a particular set of people? If you clearly examine it, it has served the purpose of only one set of people. The elite minority who don't have any roots have benefited from. So clearly, the elites have benefited from it, and these elite, they are minority, they are not the majority of the people, and they are without roots. It doesn't matter to them whether you lose bond with soil or not, but the majority, they have sacrificed a lot only for a few people. So clearly the fruits of development are not distributed equally among the people. That is the reason we increasingly talk about inclusive growth, sustainable development. So the fruits of growth has to be distributed among everybody. 15 million people have been uprooted from their homelands in India during the past 4 decades. So 15 million people have lost their homelands because of development. Have we thought about them? What has happened to them? What, how are they leading their lives? Have we compensated them? Now, these are the questions which we need to think. Definitely, we have not. Have we compensated 15 million people? No. What has become of their life? What are they doing? How are they leading their life? Have we thought about the welfare of these people? Now, that is the question. They and their links with soil have been sacrificed to accommodate mines, dams, factories, and wildlife parks. Now, we have not cared for the links or the attachment they have with their land, with their customs, with their culture. We have not cared for them. And those are sacrificed to accommodate mines, dams, factories, wildlife parks. Now, because of that, there are protests, there are grassroots movements against it, and in some cases there are violent protests have taken place. Some people have taken up guns. For example, Naxalbari movement, which began in Bengal in 1960s, was one example. If you look at the Red Corridor or the state are which are facing the problem of Naxals are mainly the tribal areas, and the factories and the factories they have taken over the land of tribals, and they are resisting. So that has become a serious problem, especially in the last decade. The problem of Naxals was severe. Even today, we still have a Naxal problem in Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, in northern Andhra. For example, there is mention of mines, dams, factories, and wildlife parks. Karnataka did not have any problem of Naxals. But when the Project Tiger was announced in the districts of where the Western Ghats is, especially the Chikmagalur, Mysore, and Dakshin Kannada, the problem of Naxal started in um, Karnataka. It was mainly because, in the name of Project Tiger, the people, the tribals living in and around this area were uprooted. Now, when they became homeless, they resisted. When they made pleas to government, when government did not hear them, they started picking up the guns. Now, again, this kind of attitude, picking of the gun cannot be defended in the democratic setup. In the democratic setup, there is provision of protest. You can make appeals. There is high court. There is justice system. So one has to take that. One has to take the democratic route, not the other route of picking up the gun. So becoming a Naxal and protesting is not the right way, but people are forced to it. Now we have to examine these problems in that light also. Now, because of this kind of development, this has caused this problem of Naxals. Not just Naxals, there are other kinds of protest movements also. Some are peaceful, some are not peaceful. One word echoes and reverberates in the songs and slogans of Indian people struggling against development: Mati, used soil. For these people, soil is not simply a resource, it provides the very essence of their being. For large segments of Indian society, soil is still sacred mother. So you must have come across many songs, slogans which highlight the importance of soil. Even in the popular picture, you must have seen, where even in films, the hero, when he comes to his homeland, he bows down and he kisses the soil. Why? because that is the reverence one has to soil. One, even in literature, in popular culture, or in songs, you constantly get this idea, idea of being attached to soil, how one is the soil is referred as mother, the attachment of soil. There are many songs and films and literary works which are based on this concept. For these people, soil is not simply a resource, it provides the very essence of their being. For example, they will not see soil as mere resource. For an industrialist, for government, soil is nothing but a resource through which they can make money. But for people who are attached to soil, that soil gives them their very being, their emotional embodiment, um, their everything is attributed to soil. For them, soil is everything. They will not see soil as a resource, whereas industrialists and government, they will see soil as mere resource. For large segments of Indian society, the soil is still a sacred mother. So there is clearly um, a difference of opinion over what is sacred, and the also to what you are attached to. Development has meant the ecological and cultural rupture of bonds with nature and within society. It has meant the transformation of organic communities into groups of uprooted and alienated individuals searching for abstract identities. What today are called ecological movements in South are actually movements for rootedness, movements to resist uprooting before it begins. And what are generally perceived as ethnic struggles are also, in their own way, movements of uprooted people seeking social and cultural rootedness. These are the struggles of people taking place in the ruins wrought by development to regain a sense of selfhood and control over their destinies. Now, the development that we are carrying out has definitely made many people lose their bonds with nature and the society in which they are living. And it has transferred the people who used to live in a community, they are uprooted, they are separated from their very own people. Why? Because of development. They are driven out of their people, they are forced out of the very place they are inhabiting, and because of this they are losing their identity. And one has to have their own identity, because loss of one's identity also causes people of losing their emotional balance. What today are called ecological movements in South are actually movements for rootedness, movements to resist uprooting before it begins. Now, the movements and resistant movements, the grassroots movements which are taking place, are not just uh, about the loss of property, but they are also about the cultural bond, the emotional bond these people have with the soil or the place where they inhabit it. Now, why are they fighting? They are fighting for their very being, their identity. And it is very essential that we recognize this part. And what are generally perceived as ethnic struggles are also, in their own way, movements of uprooted people seeking social and cultural rootedness. These are the struggles of the people taking place in the ruins wrought by development to regain the sense of selfhood and control over their destinies. Now, people are fighting not just for property, but for their social and cultural rootedness. Why are they fighting? They are fighting to regain the sense of selfhood. They want to have their say over their destinies. It is not the people sitting in the government or the industrialists cannot decide the fate of these people. They should also have they should also have the say in their destinies. Their destinies cannot be dictated by the dictums of people living of the people of the elite people or the state. Soil as a sacred mother. Wherever development projects are introduced, they tear apart the soil and sever the bonds between the people and the soil. Mati Devata, Dharma Devata. The soil is our goddess. It is our religion. These are the words of Adivasi women of the Save Gandhamardhana movement as they embrace the earth while being dragged away by the police from the blockade sites in the Gandhamardhana hills of Orissa. Dhanmati, a 70-year-old woman of the moment, had said, "We will sacrifice our lives, but not Gandhamardhana. We want to save the hill. We want to save this hill, which gives us all we need." Now, we in the previous paragraphs we have seen how people are connected to their uh, to the soil, to their land, and if they are uprooted, they are not easy to uproot. In case if they have to be uprooted, the state has to use terrorist tactics. It has to use police. It has to use lathi charge. It has to goli bar the people. But in this paragraph, we get a description of one particular incident where people resisted these developmental activities. Wherever development projects are introduced, they tear apart the soil and they sever the bonds between people and the soil. The people who carry out developmental activities do not care much about the sentiments of the people living there. Now, because of they are driven out of their land, they lose the bond which they have with the nature, with the soil. Mati Devata, Dharma Devata. For these people, soil is God, soil is the religion. But the other set of people who are elite, who are the state, for them, development is the religion. Whereas for these people, soil is the religion. These are the words of Adivasi women of Gandhamardhana movement as they embrace the earth while being dragged away by the police from the blockade sites in Gandhamardhana hills in Orissa. In this paragraph, we come across a protest movement, the protest against the developmental activities in the state of Orissa. And the name of the place is Gandhamardhana Hills. So in this Gandhamardhana Hills, developmental activity, in the name of developmental activities, the Adivasis, the tribal people who were living there were dragged away by the people. And when they were being dragged away by the people, they used the slogan Mati Devata, Dharma Devata, which means soil is their religion. Dhanmati, a 70-year-old woman of the movement, had said, "We will sacrifice our lives, but not Gandhamardhana. We want to save this hill, which gives us all we need." Dhanmati, a 70-year-old woman, she is a senior woman, she is so old, but in spite of that, she is so connected to her soil that she was, look at the words she said, "We will sacrifice our lives, not Gandhamardhana." They are not ready to give up their land. In, even if it means giving up their life, they will do that. We want to save the hill, which gives us all we need. So they are hell bent on, they have decided to save Gandhamardhana. They don't want to give up their land for these developmental activities, because for them, Gandhamardhana hills is everything. It gives them everything they need. It is everything to them. The emotional bond, the connect which they have, that is not understood by the people who undertake these developmental activities. Forests of Gandhamardhana are a source of rich plant diversity and water resources. They feed 22 perennial streams, which in turn feed major rivers such as Mahanadi. According to Indian mythology, Gandhamardhana is the sacred hill where Hanuman gathered medicinal herbs to save Lakshmana's life in the epic Ramayana. The savior has now to be destroyed for development. It has to be desecrated by Bharat Aluminium Company, Balco, to mine the bauxite. Balco has come to Gandhamardhana after having destroyed the sanctity and ecology of another important movement, Amarkantak, the source of rivers Narmada, Son, and Mahanadi. The destruction of Amarkantak was a high cost to pay for reserves. In any case, turned out to be much smaller than originally estimated. To feed its 100,000 tons uh, aluminium plant at Korba in Madhya Pradesh, Balco has now moved to Orissa to begin the rape of the Gandhamardhana hills. Now we get the description of uh, why there is why um, the company called Balco, Bharat Aluminium Company, wants to take over Gandhamardhana Hills. It is because of mines. Now, the forests which are there in Gandhamardhana are very rich. And there is a lot of plant diversity, and there are a lot of water resources. It is very rich in it, and there are 22 perennial streams. Perennial in the sense they flow throughout the year, and these perennial streams they feed the rivers. And because of these streams, uh, rivers like Mahanadi flowed throughout the year. And there is also a cultural attachment to this Gandhamardhana. What is that? According to Indian mythology, Gandhamardhana is the sacred hill where Hanuman gathered the medicinal herbs to save the life of Lakshmana in the epic Ramayana. The savior has now to be destroyed for development. Now, you all must be familiar with the epic Ramayana written by Valmiki. In that epic, once what happens is Lakshmana's life had to be saved by using the Sanjeevani or the medicinal herb which would save the life of Lakshmana. And if you remember, it is Hanuman who actually flies. He goes to this mountain where the Sanjeevani is there. He brings it and saves the life of Lakshmana. Now, according to mythology, according to the cultural belief, Gandhamardhana is that hill. So there is a cultural importance to it. There is a mythology. So people are more emotionally attached to it. And such a mountain which saved the life of Lakshmana is being destroyed in the name of development. Is this justifiable? That is the question. Now it has to be desecrated by the Bharat Aluminium Company to mine bauxite. Now, why are why the company is interested in mining the bauxite? Balco had come to Gandhamardhana after having destroyed the sanctity and ecology of another important mountain, Amarkantak, the source of rivers Narmada, Son, and Mahanadi. Now, Balco, before coming to Gandhamardhana, had already destroyed the ecology of another mountain called Amarkantak. And this Amarkantak was also very rich in natural resources. It was source of many rivers like Narmada, Son, Mahanadi. Now, these three rivers are very important rivers. They are the lifeline of the central India. The destruction of Amarkantak was a high cost to pay for reserves, which in any case turned out to be much smaller than originally estimated. Now, before taking over Amarkantak, they had made a estimation of the amount of bauxite that would be available in Amarkantak. When they finally exhausted the resources, their estimation was large. The estimation was wrong. There was difference. The estimated was huge. The estimated reserve was huge, but what was in reality was a very small amount of reserve was there. So because of this, it was not a viable, and because of that, the destruction that caused was in excess of the benefit they got from the mining. So without proper planning, without any proper precautions, unnecessarily, the natural resource which was in Amarkantak was destroyed. So to feed its 1 lakh or 100,000 ton aluminium plant at Korba in Madhya Pradesh, Balco has now moved to Orissa to begin the rape of Gandhamardhana Hills. Now, because they could not find a large amount of bauxite in Amarkantak, now they have moved to Gandhamardhana, and even the same kind of destruction will be carried on Gandhamardhana Hills. And that is the reason why Adivasis and people like Dhanmati, who is a 70-year-old woman, are protesting against this kind of development. Since 1985, the trials of the region have been obstructed the work of the company and refused to be tempted by its offers of employment. Even police have failed to stop the determined protest. Now, since 1985, trials means the court cases are going on because the people who are protesting are filing cases in courts. The work of the company or the factories or the mining is not going on. They are being obstructed by the court cases, and the people who are protesting are not tempted by the employment offer that is offered by these companies. People don't want to be employed in these companies. They want their land. They want them to be left alone. They want to be left. They want to be in their home. Even the police have failed to stop the determined protest. Police, as we know, in the cases of protests, they will use brute force. They will use lathi charge. They will use bullets. But even this has not silenced the protesters because the protesters are determined. They don't want to give up their land. The conflict and destruction were unnecessary because India does not need so much aluminium. It already has a surplus. The mining activity, however, is dictated not by the needs of the Indian people, but by the demands of industrialized countries, which are closing their own aluminium plants and encouraging imports from countries like India. Japan, Japan has reduced its aluminium smelting capacity from 1,200,000 tons to 140,000 tons and now imports 90% of its aluminium requirements. The same Japanese companies have proposed setting up joint ventures in Indian export processing zones to manufacture aluminium products with buyback arrangements. The survival of the trials of Gandhamardhan is thus under threat because the rich countries want to preserve their environment, their companies, and their luxurious lifestyle. Now, in this paragraph, again, Vandana Shiva is discussing whether all this was necessary and why is this taking place. Those reasons are discussed in this paragraph. The conflict and destruction was unnecessary because India does not need so much aluminium. So we are mining a lot, which is not actually necessary to sustain our economy. We are not so much of aluminium is not needed to fulfill whatever the required whatever is required by Indians. It has already surplus, so we are already mining a lot of aluminium. That is enough. But we are mining in excess. And why are we doing it? Let's see it. The mining activity, however, is not dictated by the needs of Indian people, but the demands of the industrialized countries, which are closing their own aluminium plants and encouraging imports from other countries like India. So the mining which is taking place is not dictated or is not carried out to fulfill the needs of the Indian people. This mining activity is carried to fulfill the needs of other countries, to fulfill the needs of the companies set up by the other companies for the other countries. It is dictated by the demands of industrialized countries who are closing their own aluminium plants and encouraging imports from other countries like India. The industrialized countries who are the first world country who are already developed, they are closing their mines because they know if they start mining in their own country, they will be destroying their own countries. Instead of destroying their own countries, now they are what are they doing? They have shut down mining in their own country and they have started importing resources from other countries. So they are in a way encouraging destruction of nature in other countries while they are careful not to make that mistake in their own country. Now this is called neo-colonialism, neo-imperialism. Japan has reduced its aluminium smelting capacity from 1 lakh, 2,000 tons to 1, 1 million capacity from 1,200,000 tons to 140,000 tons, and now imports 90% of its aluminum requirements. The same Japanese companies have proposed setting up joint ventures in Indian export processing zones zones to manufacture aluminum products with buyback arrangements. Now look at the behavior of Japan. Japan has stopped mining aluminum in its own country, but now has uh, Japan has reduced its aluminum smelting capacity. Earlier, it used to smelt around 200,000 tons, and it has reduced it to 140,000 tons. And it now imports 90% of its aluminum requirements. The same Japanese company, which used to smelt in aluminum, has now proposed setting up a joint venture in India to manufacture aluminum products, and it manufactures it has proposed a joint venture, and from this joint venture it is going to buy the products. So in this way it is avoiding mining in its own country, but it is encouraging mining in other countries. It is not destroying the nature in its own country, but it is in a way it is in a way can be held responsible for destroying the nature in other country. For example, here it is India. The survival of the trials of Gandhamardhana is thus under threat because the rich countries want to preserve their environment, their economies, and their luxurious lifestyle. Now, Japan here, case in point here, Japan is the victimizer. So Japan is not mining in its own country, but it is mining in Gandhamardhana Hills. So these companies will exploit the nature and natural resources in other countries. And the people who are dependent, who are attached to these natural habitats, will be uprooted. They will lose their existence. But these industrialized countries will preserve their environment, their economies, and their luxurious lifestyles. They will not be affected. But the poor tribals, the poor people who will be living in these rich natural resources areas will be uprooted. They will be they will become destitutes. They will be exploited. In the next paragraph, we'll again see another example of this kind of exploitation in the name of development. In Bihar, the homelands of tribals in Chota Nagpur Plateau are being destroyed to mine coal and iron ore and to build dams on its rivers. The World Bank financed Suvarnareka Dam is being built with a US $127 million loan, primarily to provide industrial water to the expanding steel city of Jamshedpur. These dams will displace 80,000 tribals. In 1982, Ganga Ram Kaulundia, the leader of the tribal anti-dam movement, was shot dead by the police. 7 years later, his fellow tribals continue to resist the building of the dam because it will tear them away from the soil of their birth, the soil which has provided them sustenance, which links them to their ancestors. As Surinder Biroli of the movement against Suvarnareka Dam says, our links with the ancestors are the basis of our society and of the reproduction of our society. Our children grow up playing around the stones which mark the burial sites of our ancestors. They learn the ways of our ancestors. Without relating to our ancestors, our lives lose all meaning. They talk of compensation. How can they compensate us for the loss of the very meaning of our lives if they bury these burial stones under the dam? They talk of rehabilitation. Can they ever rehabilitate the sacred sites they have violated? Now, in the previous example of Gandhamardana Hills and Amarkantaka, we saw how the mining activity affected the lives of the people. Now, in this example, the example of the tribals of Chota Nagpur Plateau, which is in Bihar, we will see how the dam built across the river uprooted, displaced many tribals. Here, 80,000 tribals were displaced. Now, when the dam will be built or the height of the dam will be increased, the people nearby will be affected. For example, in recent years, in 2005, when uh, the height of the dam of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel Dam built across Narmada River in Gujarat was raised, many people in Gujarat, in the border Gujarat and Madhya Pradesh, were displaced. They were mainly, people, marginalized people who were disempowered people. Now these people were uprooted. So because they don't have say in the governance, because they don't have money, they don't have influence, they don't have their voice, because nobody listens to them or care to them, they were left to themselves. Nobody was caring for them. So there was a famous protest movement against it. But again, it was the decision of the government which prevailed, and they were not compensated properly. For example, even in Karnataka, the height of the dam of Almaty, when it was raised, many people living on the banks of this river were displaced. So what happens to them? What happens to their lives? Are they compensated well? Does that compensate really reach, or it all the compensation, will it go to the corrupt bureaucrats or the corrupt officials? What really happened to that? Do we care for them? Is it recorded? Do we investigate it? Now we have to think about these people. Because they are voiceless, they will be exploited for the rest of their lives. So we have to care for these people. Now look at this example. Now in the tribals, this place falls in the state of Bihar. uh, the tribals of Chota Nagpur were destroyed uh, were being destroyed to mine coal and iron ore to build dams on its river. The World Bank financed Suvarnarekha Dam is being built with a US $127 million loan, primarily to provide industrial water to the expanding steel city of Jamshedpur. So in this Chota Nagpur plateau, there is a dam being built, um, which is financed by World Bank. The total amount of the loan that is provided is US $127 million, and this is mainly to provide industrial water for the expanding steel city of Jamshedpur. Jamshedpur is known for the production of steel, um, and to provide water to this city, the dam was being built. But there was a problem. These dams will displace 80,000 tribals. In 1982, Gangaram Kalaundia, the leader of the tribal anti-dam movement, was shot dead by the police. Now, to feed the water demand of Jamshedpur, there were dams were being built, but as a consequence, 80,000 tribals were losing their homes. Now, what will happen to them? Now, because they were going to lose their homes, they started protesting against it. There was an anti-dam movement which was led by Ganga Ram Kalondia. Now, he was shot by the police during the protest movement. 7 years later, also, his fellow tribals continue to resist the building of the dam because it will tear them away from the soil of their birth, the soil which has provided them sustenance, which links them to their ancestors. Now, even after 7 years, the tribals were still resisting uh, resisting the building of the dam because they did not want to be driven out of this land. They want to be attached to the soil of their birth because soil provides them sustenance. Everything that is needed by them is provided by the soil, and also this soil links them to their ancestors. So there is cultural, emotional, economic, all kinds of bonds are attached. They are attached to this soil, and they don't want to give it up. As Surinder Biroli of the Movement Against Suvarnareka Dam says, our links with our ancestors are the basis of our society and of the production of our society. Our children grow up playing around the stones which marks the burial sites of our ancestors. They will learn the ways of ancestors. Without relating to our ancestors, our lives lose all meaning. They talk of compensation. How can they compensate us for the loss of the very meaning of our lives if they bury these burial stones under the dam? They talk of rehabilitation. Can they ever rehabilitate the sacred sites they have violated? Now, in this, Surinder Biroli, who was against the movement against the dam which was built across the river Suvarnareka, he sums up the why these tribals are protesting. Now, our links with our ancestors are the basis of our society and of the reproduction of our society. For tribals, their link with the ancestor is very sacred. They want to be connected with the ancestors, and their ancestors have lived their lives on this land. Now, because of the dam, they will be displaced. Now, they don't want their children to grow uh, on the other land. They want their children to have this land. So, in nutshell, they want their past. They don't want to lose their past. They want to be connected with their past. They want that connection not to be lost. Our children grow up playing around the stones which mark the burial stones of our ancestors. They learn the ways of our ancestors. Now they want, so Mr. Biroli and others, other tribals, they want their children to play around the sites of their ancestors which they have lived, the site on which their bodies are buried. They want their children to learn the ways of ancestors. They want that continuity to be there. They don't want to be disconnected from their ancestors, because without relating to our ancestors, our lives lose all meaning. The moment they are disconnected from their ancestors, from their past, they lose their identity. They lose the meaning of their life, of their existence. They talk of compensation. How can they compensate us for the loss of the very meaning of our lives if they bury these burial stones under the dam? Now, whenever we come across these kind of incidents, one thing, there is always talk of compensating them. Now they can give money. The money might be a small amount or large amount, but the emotional bonding that these people have, can they compensate that? The cultural heritage, the emotional bonding, the connection which they have, can it be replaced? Can it be compensated? That is the question. How can they compensate us for the loss of the very meaning of our lives if they bury the burial stones under the dam? Now the ancestors have lived on this land, their bodies are buried on this land. Now, if the dam is built, the land will be submerged under the water. So they will lose, not only lose the land, they will also lose the connection. They will also lose the access to this land. The land will be submerged under the water. Can this be compensated? No, this cannot be compensated. They talk of rehabilitation. Can they ever rehabilitate the sacred sites they have violated? Now, because under the name of development, many activities are carried out. They are exploiting the land, resources, people, everything. They have violated the laws of nature. Can this be rehabilitated? It cannot be. So, appropriate, pertinent questions are being asked by Mr. Biroli. In coastal, now in the next paragraph, we'll get another incident. We will get to know another incident. In coastal Orissa, the people of Baliapal are resisting the setting up of National Rocket Test Range, which will displace 70,000 people from their fertile homeland. The protesters repeatedly assert their bonds with the soil as the basis of their resistance to the test range. The land and the sea is ours. We will sacrifice our lives, but not our Mother Earth. They have rejected compensation offers because cash cannot compensate for the broken links with soil, which has nurtured and sustained generations of Baliapal farmers. Now, Now after the example, we have seen the example of Amarkantak, we have seen the example of Gandhamardana Hills, and we also saw the example of Chota Nagpur Plateau, in which a dam was being built across Suvarnareka river. There is another instance in coastal Orissa, uh, in a place called Baliapal. uh, the people of Baliapal are protesting against the setting up of National Rocket Test Range. Why are they protesting? They are protesting because 70,000 people will lose their homeland, and their homeland is a very fertile land, and they are connected to it. They are economically benefited from this. So, moment they are displaced, they lose everything, economically as well as culturally, emotionally, spiritually, in every sense. The protesters repeatedly assert their bonds with soil as the basis of this resistance to the test range. So, while protesting, the protesters make the point, or they assert that they are connected to the soil. Because they are connected to the soil, they don't want to lose it, and because they are going to lose their land, that is the reason why they are resisting, why they are protesting against the setting up of the test range. The land and sea is ours. We will sacrifice our lives, but not our mother. Look at the attitude of the protesters. They say, what are they saying? The land and the sea is ours. The land and the sea does not belong to government, just not just belong to the government or to the industrialist or the high priests of the development, but the land and sea are the property of the mankind. They belong to everyone, and especially this land, it is their own. They have lived there for centuries together, and now they are being displaced. Now they will sacrifice their lives, but they will not sacrifice their land. That shows their attachment to the land. They have rejected the compensation offers because cash cannot compensate for the broken links with the soil, which has nurtured and sustained generations of Baliapal farmers. Now, whenever the talks of compensation comes, these compensation cannot be justified, because sometimes compensation doesn't reach them, even if that reach, but that compensation will not compensate for the ties they are going to lose with the soil, with the land which they are attached. Because on this land, generations together, there are many ancestors have lived their lives, and they don't want to be disconnected from this attachment. As the Oriya poet Brajnath Rai writes,